right now, there are more individuals worldwide who speak more than one language. So really the norm is to speak 2 or more languages. And what's unusual worldwide is to speak only one language. And that's important to keep in mind because we often treat bilingualism or additional language learning as something that's very strange and complicated. But it's really something that most people around the world are doing, and they're doing it quite well. And I'm particularly proud to be from the Montreal area because right now we have been identified as the Canadian capital of trilingualism because our recent immigrant population is comprised of individuals who 40% of them speak 2 languages and a third of them speak 3 languages. So we're also moving beyond 2 languages, and we're having more and more conversations about individuals who speak 3 languages. And of course, this is happening, more people are speaking more languages because of globalization. We're traveling a lot more than we used to. People are moving around a lot more than they used to. If we look only at the web, not so long ago, most of the information on the web was in English. And now you surf the web and you'll come across information in a huge multitude of languages. And interestingly, we're now in a situation where there are even more second language speakers of English than first language speakers of English. So really interesting and rich stuff going on linguistically. There's a robust body of evidence showing that individuals who speak 2 languages have certain sharpened skills, if you will. And those sharpened skills tend to be in 2 areas. The first area is controlled selective attention. So studies have shown that individuals who speak 2 languages may have an advantage in terms of multitasking. They're better able to do 2 things at once without the quality being degraded as compared to monolingual individuals. So to give you an example, there was this one study where they had bilingual and monolingual participants simulate driving and talking on a cell phone. And when they compared how well bilingual individuals did this to monolingual individuals, they found that the quality of the driving was less negatively affected when the bilingual individuals did this. So this was taken as evidence that perhaps there's an advantage there for bilingual individuals who multitask. Studies have also shown that children and adults who speak 2 languages may be better at problem solving. So, when we are engaged in problem solving tasks, we have to focus our attention on very specific things and ignore irrelevant information. And so this ability seems to be better developed in bilingual individuals according to certain studies. We also have research evidence that metalinguistic awareness is more developed in bilingual individuals. And that's the ability to think about languages and to compare language structures and overall language aspects. We know that these advantages are present early on, and there's also research evidence that these advantages may be present throughout the lifespan. For example, we have studies looking at individuals who are predisposed to develop dementia, and where bilingual individuals were compared to monolingual individuals. And it was shown that, on average, bilingual individuals will manifest the first signs of dementia about 4 years later than monolingual individuals. So interesting findings that seem to be maintained even in the elderly population. Now, in order to have these advantages, though, we have to have attained a high level of bilingualism. And we need to be using the 2 languages on a daily basis. It's not sufficient to have just a few key phrases in the language. We need to really be fluent in both languages in order to hope to have these advantages that are sometimes seen in bilingual populations. Now you'll see I have a reversible image here on the slide. Maybe some of you saw the rabbit first, and others might have seen the duck first. This is another study that compared monolingual to bilingual individuals and demonstrated that bilingual individuals seem to have an ability to hone in on both pictures more quickly than monolingual individuals. So again, more evidence of maybe cognitive advantages. Most people would agree that it's a great thing to speak two languages, and why wouldn't we want that for our children? I think that the issue and the reason why Corinne and I are here today to share this information with you is that people worry a lot when a child presents with certain risk factors. Then we start questioning, should this child be exposed to two languages? And maybe it would make the child's life easier if he or she was not. And the rationale behind that is, well, if one language is hard, it must be the case that two languages would make it even harder. And if it's hard to learn a language, then surely hearing more of a language will be helpful. So this is what our intuition says. But it's important to really dig deeper and see whether that plays out. And in fact, when it comes to learning two languages, what we know is that there are a lot of common underlying skills that cut across languages. And in fact, learning two languages is not like twice learning one language. And there's a benefit to learning languages, you'll see, even when we have certain risk factors. And that's what we're going to look at in the next few minutes. First, though, I'd like to consider with you what is the impact of making that recommendation to a family. So say you have a bilingual child and someone, and that someone could be anyone from a principal to a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a neighbor. Individuals are still very, very much recommending limiting languages when a child has a risk factor. So if someone says to a family, I would stick to one language to make things simpler, one possibility is that we've created a situation where now the child is excluded linguistically from some of the family discussions because maybe some friends of the family or some family members don't speak both languages. And so now some people may not be able to communicate with the child. We could also be creating a situation where the child is going to notice the change and say, well, wait a minute, why is everyone speaking two languages? And then with me, they're only speaking one language. What's going on? So maybe the child will feel like they have failed at that. We could also be creating a situation where the child is not completely cut off from speaking to certain members of the family, but maybe some of these family members don't master the language that they're now speaking to the child, and so the child's receiving suboptimal language models. And that's very important. So in my family, if we were to completely cut off French, well, there were some individuals in my family who don't master English, and so they'd be speaking broken English to my children, and my children would be hearing those grammatical errors on a regular basis. And lastly, in a home situation, if we eliminated a language, we could really affect the quality of the personal exchanges between family members. We speak to our children in one language, and if we're asked to change that, we can be a bit different in our interactions. I always give the example of my sons who have said to me that I don't seem to be as nice when I speak French. And that's because I don't have all the subtleties that I have in English. I don't have all the cute terms and all the delicate ways of spinning things to not contradict my teenage boys. And so they feel it when I'm not speaking what is my dominant language, English. Now, if we have a child who's becoming bilingual through schooling, for instance, in a French immersion program or an intensive English immersion program, and we recommend that the child opt out of that, we could also there be creating a situation where the child, maybe was in a French immersion school, for example, was in kindergarten and grade 1 in French immersion, and then we start to notice that the child is having a hard time, is maybe not picking up literacy at the same speed as the other children, and someone recommends having the child switch into an all-English program to help the child. Now, when the child arrives in that all-English program, that new classroom and the people involved in the child's care are not going to want to start right away providing evaluations or intervention. They're going to want to wait and see how the child adapts to this new language of instruction. And so we're delaying that window of early intervention that we usually strive for with children who present with risk factors. Also at school, we could be creating a situation where the child is feeling rejected because now the child is pulled away from their friends, from their known and comfortable setting to be placed in another setting. So that's something we really need to think about as well. And of course, we need to think about, down the road, how are this child's chances, how strong are his chances or her chances in terms of being competitive for the workforce. When we live in Quebec, we want ideally to function in both languages because that's something that we need here, and so we need to think about that as well.